Esther McVey.
Very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I want to congratulate my honourable friend for Christchurch for bringing this bill through, the Regulatory Impact Assessment Bill. As he said, it focuses the mind on the impact of rules, regulations, laws coming through to this House, and it focuses the Minister's mind and everybody here on what is going to be brought forward. So I'd like to look upon this bill you're bringing forward with a view to reforming the Public Health Act of 1984 to improve democratic checks and balances that would allow better decision-making in future emergency situations. As the honourable member has outlined, there was a failure right from the start to weigh up the potential benefits of, for example, lockdowns or closing schools, against the very real costs which have now proved to be catastrophic. Robust benefit analysis and cost and benefit analysis should have been done and should have played a crucial role in getting the balance right on what rules, laws and regulations were going to be brought through. So whatever your views on such far-reaching measures, it should be completely uncontroversial to want to do an analysis of potential policy consequences. And experts did predict that would be dire consequences as a result of bringing through those lockdown measures. In fact, the government themselves said in a report of July 2020 that more than 200,000 lives could be lost due to lockdown. Those cost-benefit analysis, those impact assessments, those benefit versus benefit analysis, health, mental health, education, should all have been done. Politicians should have done a complete 360-degree review of lockdown measures that were brought in, and they were not. Indeed, only this week we heard the evidence of Professor Mark Woolhouse to the COVID inquiry, in which he described lockdowns not as a public health policy, but a failure of public health policy. It is a failure that could only have been implemented under the current Public Health Act of 1984. Do members of this House want to risk allowing such a failure of public health policy in the future by leaving in place an act that will allow a government to shut down society without scrutiny or debate, without looking at the impact of the measures that are being taken? Or do we want to take simple precautions that would prevent such a thing happening again? If we are being honest, it wasn't just a public health policy failure, as Professor Mark Woolhouse said. Our entire democratic system failed us just when we needed it most. Some of us raised concerns early on about the removal of parliamentary oversight and felt that the government was using loopholes in the Public Health Act to regulate without being held responsible. There were precious few opportunities to hold ministers to account. In normal times, if a minister is unable to present a persuasive case for their actions, we'd have a chance to vote down those regulations. That important due process all but collapsed in March 2020. It's a topic that we discussed earlier this year at a session of the APPG on pandemic response and recovery. At that meeting, we heard from Lord Jonathan Sumption, former Supreme Court judge, who described how Parliament was effectively rendered impotent under the Public Health Act, which allowed ministers to avoid the proper debate and scrutiny we would previously have expected. As an example, the first lockdown order was made on the 26th of March 2020, but it was not considered in this place until the 11th of May. Is that really appropriate, that policies that impact people so severely, every bit of their daily lives, could be implemented without that scrutiny and some sort of scrutiny happening afterwards? The Public Health Act was designed to authorise bans on mass gatherings, isolate infectious people and close infected premises. There is nothing in it about locking down an entire nation, whether sick or not, infected or not, in their own homes. The Act should be amended to make sure that any future emergency measures are debated before they come into effect. And if the situation is too urgent, then measures may be provisional for, say, 7 days, with Parliament being recalled, if necessary, to give the proper approval. We cannot have the threat of such far-reaching measures hanging over society, ready to be imposed by a minister with no notice and without having to defend their decisions at the dispatch box. A threat that the spectre of the WHO Pandemic Treaty and the amendments to the International Health Regulations, both of which the UK will be asked to adopt next May, make very real. So it seems likely that lockdown will be considered as a public health intervention in future, and with the Public Health Act as it stands. Therefore, we have to make sure that we do have debate, we do have scrutiny, we do this impact assessment before we do such lockdowns again, which cause such disruption to livelihoods, to education, to healthcare, and to life itself. We all have constituents with heartbreaking stories of those not being able to share the joy of a child being born, not being by the side of a dying loved one, of children who now have severe mental health issues, of children who've lost education, or of livelihoods and futures that have been ruined. Of course, Parliament must have access to emergency powers in extreme situations, but their use must be limited to when they are truly needed. Surely this is the only way to proceed. We must be able to have scrutiny in the House. It must not be missing, it must not be avoided. Scrutiny is what we do to make sure that laws, regulations are the best that they can possibly be. So, surely this is the only way to proceed without taking such significant breaches of personal life. Amending the Public Health Act will surely help us make for a better, more confident decisions in the future or in event of any future crisis. Therefore, I commend what my honourable friend is doing about this impact assessment to make sure that ministers truly understand what they are putting in place before they do it, something which was absolutely lacking during the COVID lockdown.
Sir Edward Lee.